Hey guys, welcome. Thanks for coming today. I see some folks from LA, Austin, and Canada. Well, today we're going to be doing a quilted pillow with an invisible zipper. Now, I don't know if anyone here is been to any of my other classes, but I'm going to kind of go into the details about how I made this quilt block first and then show you guys the invisible zipper. So in another class, I did a quilt block on a sweatshirt and I told everyone about our software called Creativate. So I'm going to kind of dive into that today. Now, this pillow is, I picked this design for this specific one in the write-up, but the fun thing about our software, our quilting software in Creativate is you can kind of design quilts how you want. So today I'm going to actually do a different block. So to start off, I'm going to kind of move over to this. And Rich, I don't know if you can pin me so I can see myself on the screen, but I'm going to move over to this camera here. So when you go into our Creativate software, and by the way, I don't know, I don't want to confuse anyone. It was called MySewNet. We recently rebranded our software and it's now called Creativate. But we have a really cool new software called Quilting. And how it works is you can go in and fully, so here's the block I'm going to be showing you guys today. This is an Ohio Star block, a little different than the pillow I just showed you. Now I already started putting some of it together, but I'm going to show you kind of how to piece this part together. But what you can do with the quilting software, it's really cool. There's so many ways you can design, whether you want to just make one specific block like I did to make this pillow, or if you want to make multiple blocks to make, a full-size quilt. So you go in, you can pick your design. I picked the Ohio Star. You can choose the colors to represent the types of fabrics you have, and you can also pick your size. So today I'm making a pillow that's 18 by 18 inches, and that also includes these 2-inch borders that I will sew on later as well. So you have to keep that in mind if you want your pillow to be, for instance, 18 by 18, that this block itself would be a little smaller because it accounts for the side blocks as well. So, but once you were to design your full block or your quilt how you want it, and say you're brand new to quilting, you can then get step-by-step instructions, not only how to sew it together from the start. So if you'll see here, I already kind of started sewing this block together, but you would first start sewing these triangles to one side here, and then the square, and then you kind of go into rows. So it's really cool if you're brand new to quilting, and I'm actually relatively new to quilting myself. So it's a great kind of way to get started. And then not only that, if you were to be cutting these by hand, so we actually have another, our Singer Memento, which allows you to actually cut fabric out from the quilting software directly. So that's how I cut all of my shapes today, is I used my Memento. But if you don't have a Memento and you wanted to fully cut out your fabric by hand manually, it also gives you all the measurements here as well for each color fabric that you want in your block. So it's pretty cool, a really great way to get started in quilting. So to start out, as I said, I've already kind of started my block. But if you were to be starting from scratch, first thing you want to do is lay out all of your shapes to kind of have an idea of where you're going to start. Now, I already did these two, so to kind of show you this part. So first, I'm going to flip one of these triangles over. And I always like to have, so a lot of times you could do it right in the middle, but I like to have it matching up at this top edge here. And then we're going to sew down at 1/4 of an inch first this one, and then you fold it over, press it, and then do the next one. So I'm going to switch my cameras here to this one and which is,
Carly, I'm
yes,
trying to get you pinned. Are you able to see yourself now or not?
no.
Okay, it shows that you're pinned and you were spotlighted, so I'm not really sure what's going on with Zoom, just to let you know.
Okay. Is there a way I can pin myself? Let me see if I hit pin. Okay, now I see myself. I pinned myself.
Okay, it shows you pinned here.
All good. Okay, so to start off, and I don't know, I didn't ask in the comments, is anyone here a quilter or maybe wanting to start quilting, just kind of gauging everyone's interest. Um, but a main thing in quilting is you always want to quilt your shapes together with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And that's pretty tricky sometimes, staying in that even quarter of an inch. And the reason why we do that is because as you sew these shapes together throughout, say you sewed one at quarter of an inch, another one at 3/8 of an inch, whatever it be. If it gets uneven at the end, when you press it together and then you sew the rows, your quilt will look wonky. And so that's why staying in that same seam allowance is really important. So to start, I'm actually going to be using a 1/4 inch piecing foot. It looks like this. And so how it works is when I sew down these sides, instead of having this outside edge here, you're going to actually match your fabric up with this edge here. So as you sew along, as long as this side edge here and the needle is evenly in that middle point, that will give you a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So I'm going to first pop on that foot, get it ready to go. And today I'm using the Singer Heavy Duty 4411. This is a great machine for quilting and all types of sewing, and it's also a great beginner machine. So to start out, I'm going to match it up here. I'm just going to start on this end, and as you can see, I might zoom in just a tad bit more. My 1/4 of an inch foot is lined up right there on that side edge. So first I'm going to go ahead and sew these two together, and I'm just using a regular straight stitch and a stitch length of 2. So I'm just going to sew that first edge together. And when you're quilting, you don't really, oh wow, I just totally sewed that and my needle wasn't threaded. That happens. And I somehow it got all wonky and tied around here. So give me a second to fix that. No idea how that happened. Some scissors. Rethread my needle here. And the 4411 does not have a needle threader, so just give me a little patience here. All right. That's a good step to remember. Make sure your needle is properly threaded when you start. All right, so now I'm going to piece these two pieces together. But as I was saying, typically when you start sewing, you do a back stitch there. In quilting, you don't necessarily always need to do a back stitch on these pieces. So all the way to the end. My hand might have been covering that. I need to see it better. All right, so switch back to this camera here. So as you can see, I sewed this first side, and then you're gonna go and flip this one over here, matching up again this top corner. And it's okay when you sew down, you can sew right over this, and then it will fold over later and it will look totally normal. So I'm gonna match it up like this, and you can use pins or clips when sewing a quilt, but they are such small shapes that I confidently hold it together. Let me try not this time. So now you see here, this part is complete. So I'm going to go back to here. So you can see it's already taking shape. And then the next part would be to add both of these squares. And then you're going to sew that whole row to this row here. And that's basically how you would piece this whole block together. So I'm going to switch over again. Sew my squares together. like that. Grab the opposite square. So now you can see just how easy I pieced that together. So I have an iron over here and I'm gonna kind of go off the frame a tad bit. But you're gonna want to make sure you press your seams between every step of quilting. So, I have this row done now. You can tell I pressed all these seams, and sometimes the direction of which you press them, it depends on the fabric, honestly. So say that this fabric was a really light fabric, like if it was white and this was a black color, I would actually probably want to press my seams this way because typically you can see on the opposite side on a lighter fabric those seams today because it's not too bad. I press them that direction. That's another thing to keep in mind when quilting, how you press your seams and the direction. So I'm just going to come over here to my iron really quick and press these seams. Or I sew this last row on. All right. So now the last row. So I'm just gonna now, and this is the part where it does get a little tricky because you want to have this point. You can see how all these points showed up here. And when you sew along the rows, you really want to match up these edge pieces so that your point is going to be even in the middle, but you also want to stay in that quarter of an inch. So sometimes your pieces get off, that's okay, especially if you're new to quilting. And you can see here, like this edge sticks out just a little bit there versus here, but I'm going to try and stay in the quarter of an inch all the way along, even if it's really close to that edge. So that way I can hopefully still get my point to show. I will tell you the first few quilt blocks I've been making since I started working here at Singer, I struggled to get my points to show. So don't judge me. Mine disappear. Hopefully will stay in that same one. Clip these all together, just like that. And normally, like I said, I wouldn't typically use clips when quilting, but because this is a little off and I want to make sure these edges match up, I'm actually going to scoot this one over just a tad bit. I am using my clips to secure it. Yeah, I'm going really close to this edge right now. Well, can't really see it that well, but I'm going to try and just stay in that same position, but you get right below that point. All right. So now I think I came out good. My block is there. Actually, it's a little uneven there, but for the most part, I'm okay with it. So I'm just gonna give this a good press as well. One more time. All right. So when you get to this step, and I'm going to show you again how awesome these instructions are. So you've got your block done. Now it's these side panels. So first things first, you're going to sew on the two side pieces and then the top and bottom. So I'm not going to fully sew it all together because I do have another one that's already completed, but I'm just going to show you, if you were to do one of the side pieces. So you would take one of these side pieces, match it up. Good sides, obviously, this doesn't really have a good side, bad side. And same thing, I'm going to also clip this one as well. And then that will be for that side. So now you can see I sewed one of these rows on side panels. So you would just, oh, I have like a stain on my fabric. You would put one here, and then do the top and bottom. So pretty straightforward. Again, it's the Creative 8 quilting software, allows you to fully design. And we also have preset designs. If you say you want to just make one that's already in there, we have ones like that as well to kind of learn and go from there. So I do have another block that I switched this one up a little bit. I did a green border instead of the blue. And so I'm going to kind of show you guys after this. So adding your invisible zipper and sewing an invisible zipper. Has anyone here ever sewn in an invisible zipper, or is that why anyone is here to learn? I personally, I have a love-hate relationship with invisible zippers. They're great because they're invisible. You can sew them in and it's pretty cool because a garment, things like that, or a pillow, your pillow just completely disappear, or your zipper completely disappears, but sometimes they're a little tricky to do. So I'm going to kind of show you, this was a practice one I did earlier, and just the slightest point of your needle and where you would put it on the fabric, you can see this zipper's not quite fully invisible. It's a little tricky to get it all the way. And even on this one that I made here, it's invisible, but you can kind of see it. So, I mean, to me, this is good, but some people would say that's not fully invisible. And I also didn't use a green. I would recommend using a visible zipper that does match your fabric. I didn't have any that were lime green, but that also kind of helps with the appearance. So it looks more invisible. So to kind of start off, I'm going to switch back to my overhead camera. Now in the write-up, I kind of went over the cutting instructions. So obviously if you were cutting this pillow, the borders, everything is supposed to be 18 by 18. So when you cut your back piece, you kind of need to account, depending on what size you want to make your quilt block pillow, you want to account for the extra seam allowance on your back piece. So for instance, I actually cut it for my back piece. I didn't cut it 18 by 18. I cut it 18 by 19 because I wanted to add an extra inch to account for that half an inch seam allowance. So then I cut the two pieces in half. So I'm going to use this hot pink color here today for my back. And then I have my two back pieces. So at first they might look a little bigger, but they're going to shrink with that seam allowance. So what you're going to do first, and this is kind of why it gets a little confusing. So you're going to take just one of your back pieces once they're cut in half, and you're going to take your invisible zipper. Now I already clipped one side here, but you have to keep in mind so you can see here, the good side of the invisible zipper is face down. Now I'm going to show you, so today, when I sew these on, I'm going to be using this foot right here. I don't know if you can see it that well. Might go back over in front of this camera. This is an invisible zipper foot. Let me get it in focus. Get in focus. And it has these little grooves under it that allow you to easily guide this the zipper coil underneath the foot. So it's a little different than a regular invisible zipper foot or a regular zipper foot. And I'll show you, this is a regular zipper foot, which some of you guys might be familiar with. Now you can totally use a regular zipper foot to sew in your invisible zipper, but the invisible zipper makes it that much easier, this type of foot, because it kind of raises up the coils of the zipper as you're sewing, allowing you to get extra close to them. So typically, if you're using a regular zipper foot to sew on your invisible zipper, what I recommend doing is taking the tip of your iron and kind of pressing the coil out some like this, like almost flattening it before you use your regular zipper foot. So that way you can get in that extra space and move your needle position over closer. But today I'm going to be using the invisible zipper foot, so I don't really need to kind of press the coil over. But what you're going to do first is take one of your panel pieces and you're going to place one edge of your invisible zipper face down. So just like how I have it here. And you want to, you know it's right because you're going to be sewing about a 1/2 inch along the coil. So you can see here, I'm sewing, your coil should be on the inside from the edge. If your coil is right up against the edge, then you're kind of doing it in reverse. And I'm actually going to line up the top of my zipper. So this is, if I were to zip it up, I'm going to show you guys. It still has my clips in there to hold it together, but I'm going to zip it up. So you can see here, I want to clip it in so the top edge of my zipper is lined up with the fabric. Now these little extra zipper tabs here, I'm going to trim those later. So I have it pretty close to the edge, and later when we sew around, we'll just sew right over it. These are plastic and you can sew over them. And then later we'll trim off this excess. So if you have a zipper that's too long for your project, that's okay. You can shorten it. If you have a zipper that's too short, that's when it becomes a problem. So it's okay if your zipper is a little extra in the length. You can always adjust that and sew it in later. So first, I'm just gonna kind of open this up. And then, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna use that zipper foot and we're gonna sew right along this coil here, all the way down. I'm actually gonna move my zipper completely out of the way for this part so I can go right about to there and stop. And you're gonna wanna do a good back stitch at the beginning and the end. So let's go back to this camera. I'm gonna try and zoom in even more so you guys can really see this coil action here, how we sewed it. So I'm gonna put on my invisible zipper foot now. And these little guys, even though they are clear, I will tell you, I lost this zipper foot like 3 times now. It's like hard to find. So it's like they make the invisible zipper foot literally invisible. All right. So I don't know if you guys, I feel like I need to get it more focused. But so in these little coil like openings here in the foot, what I'm gonna do is I'm first gonna match it up right in one of those little coil feet. Right about here. Now, as you sew, the goal is, so right now I'm gonna move my needle down and it's right up against it, but I'm gonna just, you can play with the width of your needle position. You wanna make sure it's still in the middle, because it goes to this hole. But if you can move it even slightly closer, that works also. So a trick is you're gonna wanna also, as you start sewing it in, you might kind of have to push up on the coil, just like this, to get it up in the slot all the way so you have that space here to sew in. So I'm just gonna kind of test out my needle. Now it's in a great spot to get right up against there. The trick is you don't want it, you want to get super close, but not too close, because if you get anything in the coil, then your zipper actually won't open. So that's the really tricky part. So I'm gonna go forward a little bit and do a good back stitch, just to get this edge of the zipper in. And now I am going to just kind of keep my finger on this coil as I go, kind of raising it up. And you're gonna wanna go kind of slow. I feel like these are just, again, invisible zippers. I love hate relationship. They're kind of tricky. So the slower the better, just to really make sure you keep it in place. Remove the clips as you go. And I always say this, I've said this in other classes, my nails today match the pillow I made. I feel like I happen to always do that somehow accidentally. Not planned, but we love a matching moment. And I'm doing the invisible zipper today right in the middle of the pillow, but you could do the same technique if you wanted your invisible zipper on the bottom or the side of your pillow. All right, I'm gonna do one more back stitch at the end. All right. Okay, so we're gonna come over here. So now you can see how close that is. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna kind of test it out. And you can see here, I sewed in the one side and it's pretty, I think it's pretty good, pretty close to the edge. Now this is the part where I literally always get confused. So I actually was testing this out earlier because I hadn't sewed an invisible zipper in a minute. And I was like, wait, what am I doing wrong? Because sometimes if you were to go and piece it together and this was open, so I'm gonna take my other piece, lay it out here. It gets a little confusing because you're like, okay, is this right? But I'm like, no, it's not right because the coil is up against the edge. And I'm like, wait, this way. So what I recommend doing when you get to this part, you've sewn in one side, I would zip it back up. And then you're going to basically match it up with this top edge here. And you're going to have to kind of flip it like this. So now what you're going to do is you want to also match it up so you even it out, the fabric. So I'm going to kind of make sure it's even on the top edge. I know these are hanging off. Remember, I said I'm going to trim those. So right now my fabric is pretty even on that top edge. And then I'm going to start adding my clips to secure it as it's first zipped up. And I'll kind of show you how to when we open it up next. So, and I'm just going to clip it not quite up against the edge so I can open up the zipper after. But this, honestly, I would recommend after you sew the first edge, zip it up again, and then you'll find your place to pin it to the opposite side because it does get really confusing if you have the zipper open to do the next side because you're like, wait, which way do I flip it? And that will solve that problem. So I'm going to clip in this side as well. All right. So now that I have it clipped in, just like this, now obviously we can't sew on the double coil because the zipper foot won't fit over that. So what we're going to do now is now I'm going to turn it like this and I'm going to just open my zipper gently so that this is out of the way, the opposite side. So now you can kind of see this is clipped in, but if I was sewing this, or once I do sew it, you'll see this will be the side. And I obviously, again, I didn't use a matching zipper, but I'm loving these bright colors. And all this fabric today, all these Kona cottons, these pretty colors, I got all these at my Kohl's, so. All right. So now you're gonna do the same thing as before, where you match it up, and now you're gonna sew it on this side. And again, just remember, your coil always needs to be about a ½ inch from the edge of the fabric. If you're sewing and you see that your invisible zipper is alongside the edge, then you need to do something to reverse it. So, let me sew this other side now. Remember, I'm just gonna fold it up a tad bit. Hold it up over like that way, so it's in this little groove here. And check my needle position. I'm in a good spot. Back stitch. Again, this is the part where I feel like I'm really slow, but and you'll notice, remember I said to cut your back of your pillow like an inch bigger to account for that seam allowance. So this is where it's gonna shrink is on this edge here, taking it in about half an inch on each. Gonna actually, I really want this out of the way, so I'm gonna move this, unzip this even more, or I get down to the bottom. So,
Charlie, we do have a question.
yeah,
Someone asked, with this same approach, work on a cosmetic bag, a utility bag?
yeah, so basically this approach, how I'm sewing this in, would be the same for any way, like if you're sewing it into a garment, you know, the two sides of your garment where you're wanting to put the zipper, if you're sewing into a bag, the same method. You have your two pieces of fabric, you're gonna first lay the good side down, so the one side, and then I would recommend zipping it up and then placing it, but the same exact method I'm doing here is how you would do an invisible zipper on any other type project. So now, moment of truth. I'm going to close my zipper and I think it's pretty invisible. Not too bad. I get right here. I could have went a little closer, but for the most part, I think it's pretty good. So so then I would recommend giving it a good press all along the edges and stuff. So I know with this class, sometimes I like to ask people what they want to vote for color wise. So I actually already finished another one that was blue. So what do you guys think? Should I make the back of my pillow when I show you guys how to sew it, and should I make the back blue or should I do this pink? Blue. Okay, we're gonna go with Kathy, first one. And I think it'll be good because it'll match the little square here in the middle. Okay. So, and you can see I pressed this one. Now this one got a little off, and honestly, I don't know because it was even here for the most part. But when I sew around this pillow, I think it will work out, even though it looks a little off there. So the first thing you want to do before you sew in the back of your invisible zipper and this part of the pillow is you want to open up your zipper, because if you were to go and so we're going to sew the two good sides facing like this, if you were to go and just sew it together around here and not have your zipper open beforehand, you're going to be closed out of your whole pillow because you have to have an opening. So what we're going to do is we're going to open it up at least a little bit in the middle. So that way, but I'm going to open it up. You don't want to go all the way past there because then you're going to close yourself out. So I'm going to go like right about here. Especially with an invisible zipper, you can't really it's hard to open up on the outside. So what you're going to do is you're going to match it up all along here. So, I'm gonna get my bearings. Now, this is the part when I said you can just sew right over the zipper. So imagine here, this is going to be the hole, the opening that later we'll flip it the right side out, and then you can insert your pillow through that. So as we sew around, you're going to want to really match these two edges up here. And I'm going to sew this together about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to go all the way around the square. And you don't have to leave a hole in any of the sides because obviously the hole is where the zipper opening is. But as you sew over these edges, you're just gonna sew right over the plastic. Hopefully my needle won't break, it shouldn't break with the plastic. And that will create that zipper. Well, this is a zipper end here, but as well as on this side. And because this is a little uneven, I might just have my seam allowance in a little bit. So my borders might shrink some on this pillow. But I'm just gonna sew right over here, and that will be the new zipper end. And then afterwards, I'm gonna go ahead and trim off this part. You could trim it right now, but I'm gonna leave it just for safety measures. I can't tell you the amount of times I've cut a zipper too early, so I'm gonna wait till later on to actually trim that. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put some clips around my pillow really quick. And first I would just clip like one top edge to get that, even how you want it, and then kind of go around in one direction. So here, and I'm gonna make sure I clip it really well on this part here. Is there any other questions so far? And I was also going to mention, so, I feel like invisible zippers is one of those things. I've sewn them into garments, pillows. I've done them a lot, and no matter how many times I do them, I always need like a refresher. Like literally today, I asked some of my coworkers to show me something because it had been a minute. So, there's a lot of resources out there, and on the same Creative Aid app I was talking about in our software, we have this thing called the Sewing Assistant, and it's really great. And you can add your machine, and it will give you like tips and tricks. And if you were to add one of the higher level models of certain machines, they actually have full little like tutorials in there. And they have a full thing. You search like invisible zipper, and it'll have a step-by-step like how to put it on, how to align it with the fabric. It's pretty nifty. So what I'm going to do is start, it's not like normally where you have to leave a hole. So you start anywhere. So all the way around, I'm going to do a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And again, as I go over the zipper, I'm just going to sew right over the plastic. And I'm gonna just put back on my regular presser foot for this. I'm just gonna start in the center top edge here. Zoom out some. Yeah, make sure you do a good back stitch at the beginning. And this is the part where I get a little uneven here on my one side, so I just want to make sure I can catch all of that. And so sometimes when you do so over the coil, I would go a little slower. Honestly, sometimes it'll go faster because I think they have to like stab it harder, but it will, I think sometimes the needle will easily slide in there. So I'm just gonna go nice and slow, and you'll see it just goes right into the coil. Just like that. I was literally just sewing around this, and in my head, I was like, did I put the right sides together? And I don't know if you guys ever do that, but like some type of sewing anxiety, like, wait, did I do that right?
Kathy asked if you could backstitch over the zipper with that.
Yeah, you could. Yep. Same thing. You would go over it just as slow as you went over the first time. And honestly, I should have did that. I feel like it probably re-secures it. If you're, especially if it's a zipper that, you know, pillows you're not opening up that often, but if it's like a garment or something like a zipper bag, that you probably will want to backstitch over it just to give it extra security on that zipper stop. So that way, you know, it doesn't rip open and your zipper doesn't slide away. So now I'm going over this part. Again, I will do a back stitch here. So I'm gonna go forward. Cause this one was kind of open also, so I'm gonna do the back stitch. You know what, for good measure, I'm gonna do an extra back stitch. Now it's really severe. All right, so you're gonna be back up where you started, do a back stitch. And that's all the way around, so. This. Now I will trim my excess zipper. I feel safe enough to do that. So I'm gonna go ahead and snip that. And one other thing you want to do is kind of snip your corners. So that way they stick out better. Scissors for some sharpening, I think. All right. Snip it a little. And if you had, you could snip the seam allowances some, but I think I know where. So now what you're gonna do is you're gonna flip it the right side out. Push your corners out. And if you need like a point turner, I like to use chopsticks. I don't have any chopsticks here today. But something to really make sure you get your corners out. Four of them. I like the blue on the back. Good call, Kathy. Okay, so as you can see, look at the edges, it's sewn in and easy peasy. So I actually have another, let me find it. But yeah, that's how you do an invisible zipper. I hope that was easy to follow and understand. Maybe hopefully you guys have a better understanding now, kind of how they work. But I do have a pillow form here, so I'm gonna, put my pillow in, which I think this pillow was an 18 by 18 pillow. The good thing about pillows, if sometimes the size is a little off, you can just stuff it extra. And it's a little tight, but I'm gonna zip it up and voila. I love it. But yeah, is there any other questions or anything while I'm still here? It's pretty invisible too. It was purple, you can hardly see it. Well, thank you guys for coming. If you guys want to come to my next class, which Monet, what day did you say it was?
It's the 26th.
The 26th. This class is literally so easy. It's the perfect beginner class. It's a great kids class. I'm gonna have an embroidery machine, the SE9180, so I will be showing you some embroidery. But this is how to make your own custom drink koozies. So these are super cute with Insole Bright. So it's like a little insulated on the inside to keep your drinks cool. Easy Velcro, reversible if we wanted to do the opposite side koozies. So that will be my next class. I'm going to show some embroidery as well. But thank you guys so much for tuning in today. I hope you make some quilted pillows. That's a wrap.